Welcome to From the Trenches, success shortcuts revealed by real-world innovators crushing it right now. I'm your host, Scott Hartley, and we're back with another episode packed with actionable strategies from today's most successful entrepreneurs. If you're tired of generic business advice and ready for real cutting-edge tactics that are working right now, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to learn from my guest's 30 years of experience as an entrepreneur and some of what he's learned over the past 11 years as a quote unquote publisher. And I can't wait for my guest to share with you his transformational insights. So let me introduce you to Rob Anspach. Rob is a dynamic entrepreneur, marketing consultant, author, and podcast host who has dedicated over 3 decades to helping businesses build authority, craft legacies, and achieve long-term success. Rob, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
This is going to be great. You hit on a term, generic, that I think every entrepreneur starts off with. Now,
Yeah.
when I started, there was no internet. We put our ads in phone books and newspapers, and
Mm-hmm.
people are like, what the heck are those? Now you're spending all this money on AdWords and you're hoping that things work out.
Yep.
To me, it's still the same getting lost in the shuffle ads that people don't see.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to break out. You have to do things that are different.
Yeah.
And in my early career as an entrepreneur, I owned a carpet cleaning business.
Okay.
And so this is going back to 1995. And so, I struggled. I was the same as everybody else. Hey, 2 rooms for X amount of dollars, and nobody cares.
Right.
Honestly, they open these these coupon things, and they pick the cheapest person.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I can't compete on cheap, so I need to compete somehow better.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I started giving away free rooms of carpet cleaning. You get one free room to try me out, but I only focused on homeowners, high-end neighborhoods, and and places that I actually wanted to be in,
Mm-hmm.
because when I started out, I was getting all these awful places that had no money, the trashiest carpets, and I would never get referrals.
Yeah.
And so I'd spend all day trying to make $50. It just wasn't worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And so by offering a free room of cleaning, it transformed my struggling business into something that was actually making money. And people are like, well, Rob, how do you make money giving away stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you limit it to one room and they can see the quality of your work, and then you can give them a price for other stuff, no strings attached, most people are going to reciprocate and say, wow, you did a really good job on that one room. Let me shell out all this money to have you do all the rest. And
Mm-hmm.
so my average sale went from $50 to over 500.
Wow.
And so, I had this cleaning business for 19 years. But in the meantime, I started on Spock Media and I started designing all these marketing uh, campaigns for other cleaners.
Mm-hmm.
Problem was is that most cleaners don't have any money. Sorry for if you're a cleaner listening to this, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I shifted gears and I went after lawyers and doctors and people that made my life more pleasurable. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
instead of a cleaner paying me $500, these attorneys would be paying $5,000.
Right.
I'm making more money with less work.
Yeah.
That's the American dream. And that I ran both companies for a multitude of years. And in 2014, I sold the cleaning business after I wrote my first book.
Mm-hmm.
And the first book was called Share. 27 ways to boost your social media experience, build trust, and attract followers. Very long title. But it was the easiest social media book you'll ever read.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to sell it to publishers or sell them on the idea of this book, and they didn't want it. They wanted something complicated, something thick, something so technical that you'd need a rocket science degree to read it. You don't. My whole premise in life is to keep things simple.
Yeah.
So I wanted this book to be very simple to understand. Anybody could pick it up and learn from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided, well, if I can't find a publisher, I'm going to be the publisher. So I created a publishing house, and we put this book out and sold. It was 2,000 copies within the first month. I
Oh,
mean, people were hungry to learn social media.
yeah.
And the following year, I teamed up with another carpet cleaner former carpet cleaner, and we wrote a book on search engine optimization. And that book went #1 bestseller in 4 countries and #2 bestseller in like 2 other countries. And it was, excuse me, it was weird because I'm looking at the stats and says Japan, #2 bestseller. I'm like,
Like, where did this come from, right?
yeah, it was like an oddball thing because we got #1 in US and Canada and UK and Australia, and then all of a sudden these oddball ones in Germany and Japan, and I'm like, yeah, but they're not even in that language.
Uh-huh.
So, it was just, and I thought, okay, great. I have 2 books. This is going good. If I died now, I'd be fine. I mean, 2 books. Most
Mhm.
people struggle to even get 1 book out.
Right.
And then I was starting to write a third book. It's called Lessons from the Dojo, and it's one of my favorite books. But I had scheduled the launch in October of 2015. My
Hmm.
wife scheduled us to be on this church trip to Italy at the same time as the launch. So I wasn't around for the launch, and
Yeah.
the book didn't sell. Well, I mean, it started to sell years later,
Hmm.
and some people have said, "Oh, Rob, it's the best book ever." So I thought, and it kind of got me down. I'm like, this is my third book. I should be doing better. I should have a system.
Yeah.
But luckily, a doctor down in Mexico did get the book. He read it, he liked it, and I ended up producing 3 books for him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I've written series of books for people. I've
Hmm.
written just 1 book for people. I've helped them produce their books. And so yeah, 11 years, 50 books,
Wow.
and there's probably another 15 in the pipeline. But it was not something that I set out to be a publisher. It was kind of like this afterthought. Hey, nobody else will help me. I have to do it on my own. And
Hmm.
I learned all the mistakes. In fact, this blue book here, Unscripted, Unfiltered, Unwoo-woo, Unguru. Yes, I like long titles. Okay. Um, but that was a culmination of interviews I did with Steve Gamlin on my eHeroes podcast. And on the 7th interview I did with him over a course of 6, 7 years, I thought, these interviews show the evolution of 2 entrepreneurs, and it's just like a no BS, interview. So
Hmm.
I said, I want to put this together. And so Steve and I went through it, and people like it. It's not a typical book. It's
Yeah.
just a transcript of the interviews that we did. But here's the thing is that yes, people can go to my podcast and listen to these interviews, but they still spent money on the book because they wanted something tangible in their hand
Yeah.
that they can take anywhere.
Yep.
And so, if you're out there thinking, wow, I have all this content, what do I do with it? You recycle it.
Hmm.
Make it into a book. Make it, into your social media. Make it everywhere. But I think it overwhelms people.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
really does. And something that you mentioned there is that, recycling our content. We get tired of our own stuff way faster than our audience does because frankly, most of our audience is not going to see the majority of our
right.
content, especially if we're just posting on social media, whatever, platform that may be. And so, we're going to get tired of that. But if we're using it in email, social post, put it into a book, put it onto the podcast, you're going to
Mhm.
catch somebody who never caught it on another platform.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my Rob versus books. It
I need to
started out
get
with,
some of those because like I follow you on Facebook and like, just the stories that you share in your Facebook posts, they're so
oh,
hilarious. Like I can
it
relate to
started,
those. And I'm like, I got
it's,
to get the book. I need to read
yeah,
all of these things.
it started out with me just answering these scam calls, the Visa, MasterCard scammers.
Hmm.
And at first, I would slam the phone down and my wife's like, you're going to stroke out. Your blood pressure is too high. And I thought, okay, well, how do we do things differently? So I thought, I can toy with them. I can
Yeah.
keep them on the phone as long as I can. I can prevent them from calling other people. And so that's what I would do. I would answer the phone, string them along, and see how long it took for them to curse me out or hang up. And I would write these stories down and share them to Facebook. And people are like, "Oh, Rob, yeah, that's these are so funny. You should make a book." So I assembled 50 of them, 50 of these stories, and made Rob versus the Scammers. And
Hmm.
I had enough material left over that I wrote Rob versus the Morons. And this continued. So I have 8 Rob versus books.
Oh, wow.
I have books 9 and 10 already sketched out,
Hmm.
but the books write themselves,
Yeah.
But it was, I think the highlight of these books though was during COVID, people were stuck in their homes. They would buy my books, and embrace the sarcasm.
Hmm.
Um, but then, I have one book called Rob versus the Entitled, and Amazon pulled it off, their shelves,
Hmm.
um, for 6 months.
Oh,
And I'm
really?
like, where's my book? What happened? Well, somebody got triggered by it, and we had to pull it. I said, do you understand? It's part of the series of sarcastic books that deal with real life interactions. Oh, okay. And then they finally put it back up. But I'm like, how much income did I lose?
Right.
It's like, I don't know.
And those
I
types of
think,
books are really cool though because it's stuff that you're just observing and
right.
participating in, but when you put it into that book format, I mean even just on Facebook, but when you put it into that book format, people can relate.
Mhm.
They may not string the scammers along or all that type of stuff, but you mentioned the one book, is Rob versus the Morons. I mean, all of us are dealing with people that we think in our head, it's like, man, you are such an idiot, right?
Yeah.
And so when they read these other stories, it's just a relatable thing that it's like we've got to consume this, right?
Yeah. And the thing is that the Rob versus books are about the only ones that have my face big and bold on the book. Rob versus the Scammers doesn't have my face, but it has a hooded person.
Hmm.
It's supposed to look like a scammer, but all the other ones got more ridiculous over time. It's like, okay, how do I outdo the next one on the cover?
Yeah.
And so it was kind of fun to do that. But you know, I put more material in the books than what I share on social. So the social,
Hmm.
you're just going to get the conversation.
Yeah.
In the book, I'll actually have a little life lesson after that, saying, "Hey, this is why you don't want to, give information over the phone to scammers, or this is why you don't want to, deal with this type of customer service."
Hmm.
And people like that. Not only did they get a funny story, but they also got a life lesson.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of putting all my skills from lessons from the dojo inside these sarcastic books.
Hmm.
You know, here's the thing is that during COVID, nobody was laughing. I mean,
Right.
I'd go everywhere and people were so serious. They got masks on. You couldn't see their expression. Nobody just, and so having a book that enabled them to laugh, they remembered who I was.
Hmm.
And it was funny because I was flying through the Dallas airport. I had a connection, and out of left field, someone goes, "Rob!" And I'm like looking all around, and they're like, "Oh, we love your books," and I'm like, "How are you?" They knew who I was because my picture's on the book,
Yeah.
but it freaked me out. It was the first time, and I'm like, I get it. In my own local neighborhood, people know me, but
Right.
in an
We're just
airport,
walking through the
Harley.
Dallas airport, like, who do I know here, that knows me, right?
So it was my first kind of glimpse at no longer being this guy that lives in a small town.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know,
Now, you just recently have written a new book called Legacy. Tell us a little bit about that.
yeah, legacy, and like I said, it's still thin. I keep all my books very thin because I
Hmm.
want readers to be able to read this in about an hour or two and go
Hmm.
about their day.
Yeah.
I don't like non-intimidating books. Those big, thick things. Take you 6 weeks to read.
Yeah.
Uh, legacy. I've written and produced all these books, and I'll be 56 this year. And I thought, what am I leaving behind? What is it that people should know about me 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now?
Hmm.
And most people think legacy, you leave behind money, you leave behind wealth. The problem with that is that within the third generation, that money's gone.
Hmm.
So nobody's learned anything about you giving the money.
Yeah.
But legacy is kind of my guideline to help businesses, entrepreneurs, and even people that don't have a business leave behind knowledge that can help not only the next generation, but 20 generations after that.
Hmm.
We need to be the that lighthouse that sheds that beacon out there to
Hmm.
give the next generation hope. Because
Yeah.
I look at all the things that are going on, and I'm not bringing politics or religion or anything else. I'm just saying culture changes.
Yeah.
You know, so if you can give that next generation a glimpse of what the past was,
Hmm.
they can learn from it.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, Rob, I don't have kids. Well, do you have clients that have kids? And
Hmm.
most of them do. you
Yep.
know, then you're passing that knowledge on to them. And I think, when I first started as an entrepreneur, everything I thought about was transactional. How can I make money then
Hmm.
that will enable me to pay the bills? But I never thought about the long game. I
Hmm.
never thought, okay, if I reversed engineered this when I was 25 years old, would I have thought about the long term? Would I have thought, oh, what am I doing now, right now, that will enable future generations? And
Hmm.
I think if all entrepreneurs started thinking that way, they would run their businesses differently. It
Sure.
would no longer be about, going after the cheapest client. It would be about, hey, these are the prices I need to charge so that I can have a healthy business, that I can pass this on, that I can, you know, retire in comfort. Uh,
Hmm.
Most entrepreneurs don't think that way.
Yeah.
They think, oh, I have to be the cheapest person so I can get the sale, so I can go buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
It's always about the here and now.
Yeah.
Why not the future? Why? And so yeah, that I wrote this book, so that future generations can understand, how we lived and what we want, and I want to teach the current generation of entrepreneurs, you know, the important lessons. And it's not always money. It's how to have a legacy marketing plan. And that's what I tell people. Look, early on in my career, yes, I did the phone book. Yes, I did these Clipper magazines. Yes, my marketing was the same.
Hmm.
When I started to be different, my business grew,
Yeah.
and I was able to maintain that business for a long time.
Yeah. Well, and it just shows that, I mean, you were even, way back in 1995. And it's hard to imagine, like, that's so long ago now, for somebody who was, I was born in 1975, but it's one of those things where you just see how much more crowded that
Mhm.
the marketplace has become, and
Mhm.
that it's so difficult to stand out but it's so easy to blend in and just be like everybody else. And so we really do have to give a lot of thought and time and energy of how can I be seen differently so that people want to do business with me as opposed to everybody else that's, doing the same thing that I'm doing. And I think it's interesting, that and what you talked about at the very beginning with your carpet cleaning business, most businesses, because like you just mentioned too, they're focused on the here and now. I need to make money so that I can buy groceries this week or whatever that the case may be. So many businesses operate from this position of scarcity, position of lack, and they're like, I can't give away something for free, even though I know that doing that is going to actually bring in more revenue later down the road. It just may not be today or this week. And so we have to change our mindset around a lot of that and be willing to take some of these risks because it's like, well, that worked for Rob. He was able to go in and do this, one room cleaning, and instead of the $50 that he was getting, now it got him $500. Well, that worked for him, but here's why, all the reasons why it won't work for me. We have to let go a lot of that type of stuff. And by sharing that story here on this podcast today, I don't know if it's in your book, but I'm sure that there are similar stories in your book. That's going to inspire current entrepreneurs and that future generation, because just think where you and I would be if
Mhm.
we didn't have a lot of the classics that were written many, many years before us,
Right.
right?
And going back to free, I've made that same philosophy and I put it on my website. So, if you go to my website, which is anspachmedia.com, and you go into my store, you can download a bunch of my books for free. In fact, the
Hmm.
unscripted, unfiltered, unwoo-woo, unguru book is there. There's if you're on LinkedIn and you don't like the cringe, I wrote a book called LinkedIn Without the Cringe, and that's for free.
Hmm.
And I'm putting a bunch of other new books on there because I think it's important that people not only read and educate and learn, but for me, it's not always about making the immediate sale. I
Hmm.
want you to know, like, trust, and feel safe with me.
Yeah.
And so if you read my books and say, wow, I've learned a lot. Let me hire Rob to, help me with my long-term marketing goals.
Hmm.
Let me help, have him do this or do this. Or let me just, book a consultation.
Hmm.
You know, I've always been a big believer that education comes first.
Yeah.
And I have to educate my client to know who I am.
Hmm.
But in the same respect is that I also, write books in a sarcastic manner, some of them, like the Rob verses, as a form of rejection marketing. If you
Hmm.
don't like sarcasm, you're not going to like dealing with me.
Right.
And so you're not going to hire me. And that eliminates 90% of my problems right off the bat.
Hmm.
So if you like sarcasm and you'll love my books, we're going to be great friends, and you'll stick with me for a long time. And I think that was the hardest part for me is that we're told as entrepreneurs that we have to be politically correct, we have to be super nice to everybody, we have to accept everybody as a client, we have to walk on eggshells, we're not allowed to say bad things on the internet. And I'm like, that's too many rules. I don't want to listen to. My head was about to explode.
Right.
And it's like I just want to be me.
Yeah.
And the more I was me on the internet, and the more I was me in real life, people were like, "Well, wow, wow, he's a refreshing breath of sarcastic air." So, you know, they would get the real me on the internet. They would get the real me in real life, and they're like, you're the same.
Hmm.
I deal with some people, and it's a different persona on the internet.
Yeah.
How do you trust them?
Yeah,
So,
you really can't. And I've talked about this, a lot in different groups and everything, but people are craving authenticity.
Hmm.
Social media, and I think in my email that's going out, today, I mentioned that, we all paint this perfect picture of our life on social media. It's all the happy photos. It's like things are going great and, all that type of stuff. When behind the scenes, for so many people, that's not reality. And, if we're not authentic, and I like the fact that you point that out, if we're not authentic, both online in our persona that we're putting out there and in person, whether somebody interacts with us, live in person on Zoom or whatever that it is, shouldn't it make us question?
Hmm.
You know, but that authenticity and what you mentioned is like when you had the confidence to be you, to be sarcastic, and to put that out there. Like, hey, this is who I am. Take it or leave it.
Hmm.
Like you attract the people. And again, it can eliminate that scarcity mindset that so many entrepreneurs have
Hmm.
because there's more than enough people that like us for who we are, like our style and everything. There's going to be, probably millions of people that don't like sarcasm or your style of sarcasm. Okay, that's fine.
Exactly.
There's plenty of people who do, right? That you can serve. I mean, we can't serve everybody in the world. So I love that you brought that up. Yeah.
It's and I'm tired of the FOMO on the internet, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
For me, it's always been JOMO, the joy of missing out. And people are like, well, Rob, how come you didn't go to that event? There's too many people. I don't want to go. I have a family, I have kids, I got grandkids. I'd rather be at home.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to some of these seminars, it's the same BS over and over. It's like this, dude, I saw you said the same thing 10 years ago at an event I was at. Don't you have
Right.
new material? And it's so I pick and choose the events I want to go to, and a lot of times they're totally polar opposite of what I'm used to
Mm-hmm.
because I want something new,
Yeah.
you know. I don't want the same old, so you go to some of these big events and the same speakers, and it's like, good Lord, that guy needs to retire, really. Come on.
Right.
But it's for them, it's what sells,
Yeah.
and so I get it. But you can sell your stuff just by going up and sharing stories of how you've helped people,
Mm-hmm.
and people are going to buy your stuff. You don't have to, but yeah, it's the same old broken record, and it gets annoying, but that's who they are. For
Yeah.
me, it's I try to be different.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that was the hardest part, when you transition from a company that's very competitor, um, what's the word? Maybe it's competitor dependent
Mm-hmm.
because you're always looking at what your competitors are doing.
Yeah.
For me, it's like nobody does what I do in the manner I do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, maybe they do similar things, but they're not me. So
Right.
I have no competitors.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that. They're like, yeah, Rob, this guy's your competitor. No, he's not. Oh, this person is. No, he's not.
Yeah.
You know, have
Create
any
that
of them,
category of one of
yeah,
yourself, and a lot of that is you as the person, right?
yeah, have any of them published more than 50 books? Have any of them done this? Well, no, but no, I'm my only competitor. And
Yeah.
when you look at it that way, you stop thinking about everything that your competitors are doing. You
Mm-hmm.
don't even worry about it. Oh, my
Yeah.
competitors are charging, $100. I better charge 99. I'll get all the clients then. No, you won't.
Right.
No. Charge double what they're charging and only focus on, for me, I only take on one new client a month.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, well, Rob, that's hard to believe. What do you must be really making a lot of money. For me, it's the simplicity model
Yeah.
where I only need to hire or accept one new client a month to make money, to be
Mm-hmm.
comfortable, to live the life that I want, and most of them stay with me. So it just compounds and compounds. But
Yeah.
if you're trying to if you're doing 60 discovery calls a month, you're more exhausted doing discovery calls and you have no time to focus on your clients.
Right. Yeah. So true. Yeah.
So yeah, it's some of these things you learn in the trenches.
Yeah.
Some of these things, like my favorite phrase is the cheaper the client, the more hassles involved.
Oh, that's so true.
And so, the I think I've shared that a million times on the internet, and people are like, "Well, Rob, sometimes you need cheap clients." Yeah, but if they're going to give me 90% of the headaches, I don't need them.
Right.
Yeah, a cheap client will say, "Oh my God, Rob, it's $500. Well, can you do this? Can you add this?" But the $5,000 client is like, "All right, who do I make the check to?"
Yeah.
And so the people that spend more money with you understand the value that they're getting. They
Hmm.
appreciate the work that you're doing, and they're more willing to refer you to people just like them. The
Yeah.
cheap client is going to bitch, complain that they're going to want half their money back, and they're not going to refer you to anybody, or they refer you to people that have no money like them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want a business like that, honestly.
Well, and
Yeah.
the clients that are investing more in you, they trust you more, that you're going to be doing what needs to be done, whatever they've engaged you for, and they're focused on growing their business. They're focused on what they should be doing, and they're not micromanaging and questioning everything that you're
Right.
doing. And so, that really comes through. And how much are they willing to commit, financially? And for those type of people, it's just a totally different mindset that they have, is what I've found.
Yeah. But it takes time to learn these things.
Yeah.
And sometimes reading, whether my books or Scott's books or anybody's books, will allow you to skip a few steps.
Hmm.
Or, and but you have to understand why you're skipping a step. You
Yeah.
have to understand, okay, if I do this, this, and this, based on what Rob or Scott says, this is the reaction or the implied action I'm going to get. And just like lawyers, future results or past results don't equal future, whatever that BS is.
Yeah.
The key thing
That
is, if
disclaimer.
you if you follow closely to what we do, to what we teach, your success is going to be greater.
Hmm.
If you just
Yep.
go, "Oh yeah, Rob, a legacy book, I'm just going to skim it." "Oh yeah, I get it." And then you go off and you're like, "Yeah, I read your book." No, you didn't. And you're not going to understand anything because you didn't put your mindset into the book.
Yeah.
So, whether you're learning from me or anyone else out there, just make sure that you understand the steps and the actions that the book's telling you to do.
Yep. That's so critical. Well, Rob, I appreciate your time here today. Just tell us once again, how they can go check out the books that you have and get some of your free ones.
You can go to anspachmedia.com and you'll find the shop button. You can click on some of the free books. You can go to my other link, which takes you directly to Amazon. It's called getrobsbooks.com.
Okay.
And that forwards you right to Amazon. You'll see all the ones, and you can buy to your heart's content. The Rob versus books 1 through 8 you can buy as a combo on my website or individually through Amazon.
Hmm.
A lot of times I tell people, "What? Go to Amazon, just buy it because you'll get it the next day."
Right.
You know, you want to buy it from me? I only get to the mailbox, the post box every now and then, so it's going to take some time to get to you. "Oh, but Rob, I want your signature." Why? So, but go out there, find my books, download them, buy them, and anything I can help you with, just give me a call.
Fantastic. Well, Rob, it has been a great conversation here today, just kind of learning from what you have, experienced and gleaned from your 30 years as entrepreneurship, and just kind of, started to write about, in your books that you just kind of fell into, 11 years ago, doing the whole publishing thing. So, well, everybody, that's all for today's episode of From the Trenches. Remember to check out Rob's books at anspachmedia.com, and we'll put the link into the show notes just in case you're not in a place place where you can write that down right now. And if you're looking to supercharge your email marketing, check out my book, Hit the Inbox, at hittheinboxbook.com. It's packed with 76 pages of strategies to get your emails landing in inboxes and driving sales, especially in today's ever-changing world of the rules of email marketing. Thanks for tuning in today. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. It helps us reach more entrepreneurs like you. And until next time, keep crushing it in the trenches.